everyone, welcome back to my channel Escape to Storyland. Today I'm going to read another story called The Man Who Went Too Far by E.F. Benson. Before I start, do subscribe to my channel, do hit the like button, and do hit the bell icon for further notification. So here we go. The little village of St. Faith's, situated on the north bank of the River Fawn, in the country of Hampshire, is one of those tiny villages that offers the vast beauty of nature, with its forests and animals that welcome anyone who travels by. Once outside the village, you may walk in any direction for the length of a summer afternoon without seeing the sign of a human habitation, or possibly even catching sight of another human being. But you will not feel in the least lonely. In summer, at any rate, the sunlight will be bright with butterflies and the air thick with all those sounds which, like instruments in an orchestra, combine to play the great symphony of the yearly festival of June. Though this sounds like a perfect place for the people of the village to thrive in, there was something that haunted them from making the most of what the nature had to offer them. One story that I have heard is the tale of a monstrous goat that has been seen to skip with hellish glee about the woods and shady places. And this perhaps is connected with the story which I have here attempted to piece together. It is about a young artist who died here not long ago. He was a young man of great personal beauty, and there was something about him that made men's faces to smile and brighten when they looked on him. His ghost, according to the villagers, walks constantly by the stream and village where he lived, and its garden in which he was buried. I think that the terror of the forest exactly started from that day. The story that I'm about to talk is based partly on the account of villagers, but mainly on that of Darcy, a friend of mine, and a friend of that man with whom these events were related to. This house at the end of the village stood outside the shadow, and the lawn which sloped down to the river was still studded with sunlight. Garden beds of dazzling color lined its gravel path, and down the middle of it was a shaded sitting area made of bricks, half hidden in clusters of rumbler rolls. At the bottom end of it, between two of its pillars, was slung a hammock containing a short-sleeved man. On the terrace, a young, silent-footed manservant was busy with the laying of the table for dinner. He was neat-handed and quick with his job, and having finished it, he went back into the house and reappeared again with a large, rough bath towel on his arm. With this, he went to the hammock in the sitting area. "Nearly 8, sir," he said. "Has Mr. Darcy come yet?" asked a voice from the hammock. "No, sir. If I'm not back when he comes, tell him that I'm just having a bath before dinner." The servant went back to the house, and after a moment or two, Frank Halton struggled to get out of the hammock and slipped out on the grass. He was a medium height and rather slim in build, but the muscular grace of his movements gave the impression of great physical strength. Even his descent from the hammock was not an awkward performance. His face and hands were of very dark complexion, either from constant exposure to the wind and sun, or as his black hair and dark eyes tended to show from some strain of southern blood. His head was small, his face of an exquisitely handsome man. But there was something about his look, something which living and experience alone can give someone. One would be puzzled to see that on his face, even though he was not old enough to gain that wondering satisfaction of life and its experiences. He was dressed according to the season and the heat. He wore only a shirt open at the neck and a pair of flannel trousers. His head, covered very thickly with short, curly hair, was bare as he strolled across the lawn to the bathing place that lay below. He swam upstream, and after 5 minutes of swimming with the flood, he turned over on his back and with his arms thrown wide floated downstream. His eyes were shut as he talked gently to himself. 15 minutes later, he appeared again at the bottom of the lawn, dressed as before, his wet hair dried up into crisp, short curls again. His servant came to the door, leading onto the terrace, followed by a man who appeared much older to him. Frank and he saw each other across the bushes and quickly walked towards each other. "My dear Darcy," cried Frank, "I am charmed to see you." But the other stared at him in amazement. "Frank?" he exclaimed. "Yes, that is my name," he said laughingly. "What is the matter?" Darcy took his hand. "What have you done to yourself?" he asked. "You're a boy again." "Ah, I have a lot to tell you," said Frank. "Lots that you would hardly believe, but I shall convince you." He broke off suddenly and held up his hand. "Shh! There is my nightingale." The smile of recognition and welcome with which he had greeted his friend faded from his face, and a look of being spellbound took its place, as of a lover listening to the voice of his beloved. Then something perhaps startled the bird, for it suddenly stopped singing. "Yes, lots to tell you," he said. "Really, I'm delighted to see you. But you look so pale and tired." "No wonder after that fever. And there is to be no nonsense about this visit. It is June now. You will stay here till you're fit again. 2 months at least." I can't stay for that long." Frank took his arm and walked him down the grass. "I shall tell you openly when I'm tired of you. But you know, when we had that studio together, we used not to bore each other. However, it is very bad to talk about going away on the moment of your arrival. Just take a stroll with me by the river, and then it will be dinner time." Darcy took out his cigarette case and offered it to her. Frank laughed. No, not for me. Dear me, I suppose I used to smoke once. How very odd. Given it up? I don't know. I suppose I must have. Anyhow, I don't do it now. I would as soon as think of having meat. I would probably give that up as well. Another victim of vegetarianism. Victim? Do I look like that to you? He paused on the side of a stream and whistled softly. Next moment, a moor hen ran across the river and up to the bank. Frank took it very gently in his hand and stroked its head as the creature lay against his shirt. "And is the house still secure?" he asked while petting the hen. "And is the missus quite well? And are the neighbors flourishing?" "There, dear, fly away now." And he flung it into the air. "That bird's very tame," said Darcy, slightly confused. "It is rather," said Frank. During dinner, Frank was busy in bringing himself up to date in the movements and achievements of this old friend whom he had not seen for 6 years. Those 6 years, it now appeared, had been full of incidents and success for Darcy. He had made a name for himself as a portrait painter, which went on for a couple of seasons, and he had no free time for himself. Then, 4 months back, he had a severe attack of typhoid, the result of which, as concerning this story, was that he had come down to this secluded place to stay for a while. "Yes, you've got on," said Frank at the end. "You have earned so much money, oh Darcy. How much happiness have you had all these years? That is the only imperishable possession. And how much have you learned?" "Oh, I did not mean in art. Even I could have done well in that." Darcy laughed. "Done well? My dear fellow, all I have learned in these 6 years, so to speak, in your house. Your old picture fetched huge prices. Do you never paint now?" Frank shook his head. "No, I'm too busy," he said. "Doing what? Please tell me." "That is what everyone is forever asking me." "Doing? I suppose you would say I do nothing." Darcy glanced up at the brilliant young face opposite him. Frank shook his head again. "I mean exactly what I said. I have been doing nothing, and I have been never so happy or occupied. Look at me. Have I not done something to myself to begin with?" Darcy pushed back his chair and sat sideways to the table, looking at the other. "Has that been your occupation then?" he asked. Suddenly, Frank rose. He advanced to the edge of the terrace and looked out, standing stretched with arms outspread. Darcy heard him draw a long breath into his lungs and after many seconds expel it again. 6 or 8 times he did that, then turned back to the lamplight. "It will sound to you quite mad, I expect. But if you want to hear the soberest truth I have ever spoken or shall ever speak, I will tell you about myself. But come to the garden if it is not too damp for you. I have never told anyone yet, but I shall like to tell you. It is long, in fact, since I have ever tried to classify what I have learned." They walked into the sitting area of the garden and sat down, and then Frank began. "Years ago, do you remember? We often used to talk about the loss of joy in this world. So many things had contributed to this loss, some of which were good in themselves, others that were completely bad. Among the good things, I put we may call certain Christian virtues, renunciation, resignation, sympathy with suffering, and the desire to relieve sufferers. But out of those things, there are bad ones. Useless rejections, self-discipline for its own sake, suppression of the flesh with nothing to follow, no form of gain that is, and that awful, terrible disease which devastated England some centuries ago, and from which by hereditary of spirit we suffer now. Puritanism. That was a dreadful plague. Those savage men who held and taught that joy and laughter and merriment were evil. Now, all my life, I have believed that we were intended to be happy, that joy was one of the gifts of God. And when I left London for my career, I did so because I intended to devote my life to find this joy and happiness. So I took one step backward or forward, as you may choose to put it, and went straight to nature, to trees, birds, animal, to all those things which quite clearly have one aim, which blindly was to follow the native instinct to be happy, without any care at all for human law or law of God. Darcy turned in his chair. Ah, but what makes birds and animals happy? He asked. Food, and mating. Frank laughed, gently in the stillness. Do you think I became a pleasure seeker? He said. I did not make that mistake, for such pleasure seekers carry their miseries on their back, and his feet is wrapped in a shroud that shall soon cover him. I may be mad, it is true, but I am not stupid anyhow, as to have tried that. He paused for a moment. So I went to nature, he said. I sat down there, in New Forest, sat down fair and square, and looked. That was my first difficulty, to sit there quietly without being bored, to wait without being impatient, to be very alert, though for a long time nothing particular happened. The changes, in fact, was very slow in those early stages. Nothing happened? Asked Darcy, rather impatiently. Why? What in the world should have happened? Your solitary stay have made you inhuman, said Darcy. No, human. Rather more human. At least rather less of an ape. Well, that was my first quest. I sat down and waited. I looked at happy things, avoided the sight of anything unhappy. And with time, a little drop of happiness of this blissful world began to filter into me. The drops grew more abundant, and now, my dear fellow, if I could turn myself into you or give you the joy that runs through me day and night, you would throw the world, art, everything aside and just live, exist. When a man's body dies, it passes into trees and flowers. Well, that is what I have been trying to do with my soul before death. The servant had brought into the seating area a table with glasses and spirits, and had set a lamp upon it. Darcy felt suddenly excited. Go on, he said. Go on. I can feel you are somehow telling me the sober truth. I think you're mad, but I don't see those matters. About 3 years ago, I was sitting one morning in a place I will show you tomorrow, said Frank. It is down by the river, very green with shade and sun, and the river passing there through some little clumps of reeds. Well, as I sat there doing nothing but just looking and listening, I heard this sound, quite distinctly, of some flute-like instrument playing a strange, unending melody. I thought at first it was some musical countryman on the highway and did not pay much attention. But before long, the strangeness and indescribable beauty of the tune struck me. It never repeated. Before long, itself, but it never came to an end. It ran its sweet course and gradually came to a climax. And having attended it, it went on. Another climax was reached, and another, Then I began to wonder where it came from. It came from the reeds and from the sky, from the trees. It was everywhere. It was the sound of life. It was, my dear Darcy, as the Greeks would have said it, it was Pan. Pan was playing on his pipes, the voice of nature. It was the life melody, the worldly melody. In ancient Greek mythology, Pan is the god of wild shepherds and flock, and companion of the nymphs. He has a back, leg, horn of a goat, and the manner of a fawn. Darcy went too interested to be interrupted. He had many questions, but didn't want to stop Frank. Well, for the moment, I was terrified with the impotent horror of nightmare, and I stopped my ears and just ran from the place and got back to the house, panting, trembling, literally in a panic. Unknowingly, for at that time I only went after joy. I had begun, since I drew from my joy from nature, to get in touch with the nature. I saw that when I emerged from my terror, I went back, humbly back to the place where I heard the panpipes. But it was nearly 6 months before I heard that again. Why was that? Asked Darcy. Surely because I had revolted, rebelled, and worst of all been frightened. For I believe that just as there is nothing in the world which so injures one body as fear, I was afraid, you see, of one thing in the world which has real existence. After 6 months, one blessed morning, I heard the piping again. I wasn't afraid this time, and since then it had grown louder. It has become more constant. I now hear it often, and I can't put myself into such an attitude towards nature that the pipes will most certainly sound. And never yet have they been played the same tune. It is always something new, something fuller, richer, more complete than before. What do you mean by such an attitude towards nature? Asked Darcy. I can't explain that, but by translating it into a bodily attitude, it is this. Frank sat up for a moment, quite straight in his chair, then slowly sunk back with arms outspread and head dropped. That, he said, an effortless attitude, but open, resting, receptive. It is just that which you must do with your soul. Then he sat up. One more word, he said, and I will not bore you further. Not unless you ask me questions shall I talk about it again. You will find me, in fact, quite sane in my mode of life. Birds, beasts, you will see behaving somewhat close to me, like that moorhen, but that is all. I will walk with you, ride with you, play golf with you, and talk with you on any subject you like. But I wanted you to know what has happened to me, and one thing more will happen. There will be a final revolution. I know that, but the realization of it is not yet mine. But it will be one day, so I take it. I shall see Pan. It may mean death, the death of my body. That is there, but I don't care. It may mean immortal, eternal life. Lived here and now forever, but for the first time I will have full knowledge. Full knowledge. Darcy watched his face narrow. You're afraid of that moment, he said. Frank smiled at him. Quite true. You are quick to have seen that, but when it comes to it, I hope I shall not be afraid. For some little time, there was silence. Then Darcy wrote, You have bewitched me, you extraordinary boy. You have been telling me a fairy tale story, and I find myself saying, promise me it is the truth. I promise you that, said the other. And I know I shan't sleep, added Darcy. Frank looked at him with a sort of mild wonder, as if scarcely understood. Well, what does that matter? He said. I assure you it does. I am a wretched unless I sleep. Of course, I can make you sleep if I want to, Frank said in a broad voice. Well, do. Very good. Go to bed. I will come upstairs in 10 minutes. Next morning, they went down the village street when an old woman, very bent and weak, but with an extraordinary cheerfulness of face, came out from her cottage. Frank instantly stopped when he saw her. You old darling, how is it going? He said, but she did not answer. Her dim old eyes were fixed on his face. She put her two wrinkled old hands on his shoulder. You are just the sunshine itself, she said, and he kissed her and passed on. But hardly a few feet further, something strange happened. A child, running along the path towards them, fell on his face and started crying out of fright and pain. A look of horror came into Frank's eyes, and putting his finger in his ears, he ran at full speed down the street and did not pause till he was out of the child's sight. Darcy, having made sure that the child was not really hurt, followed him in amazement. Are you without pity then? Frank shook his head impatiently. Can't you see? Can't you understand? That sort of thing, pain, anger, anything unlovingly throws me back, slows down the coming of the great hour. Perhaps when it comes, I shall be able to understand the side of life as well. At present, I can't. They had come to a dam above the village. Then suddenly, Frank flung himself face downwards on the grass at the edge of the stream, burying his face in the daisies. Then suddenly, the muscles of Frank's neck became stiff and alert, and he half raised his head, whispering, the panpipes, close, oh so close. He closed his eyes and listened to the music, and then said, that was good, he said. How is it possible you did not hear? Oh, you poor fellow, did you really not hear anything? The month of July came with a couple of days of heavy rain, and Darcy, unwilling to risk a cold, stayed in the house. But to Frank, this change of weather seemed to have no change on his behavior. He spent his days exactly as he had done in the month of June, laying in his hammock, stretched on the dripping grass, walking into the forest with birds hopping from trees to trees and after him, and then return in the evening, drenched, soaked, but with the same unquenchable flame of joy burning within him. One fine evening, tired and oppressed by the stress of the day, Darcy fell at once into heavy, uncomfortable sleep. He woke suddenly into full consciousness with the explosion of thunder in his ears, and he sat up in the bed with his heart racing. Then for a moment, as he recovered himself from the panic and found that there was silence, other than the steady hissing of rain on the shrubs outside his window. But suddenly, the silence was shattered by a scream from somewhere close at hand, outside in the garden, a scream of supreme terror. Again and once again it shrilled up, and then a couple of awful words were heard. A shivering, sobbing voice that he knew said, "My God, oh Christ!" And then followed a little mocking, bleating laugh. Darcy was already fumbling at his door handle. Even as he opened it, he met a terror-stricken face outside, that of the manservant who carried the candle. "Did you hear?" he asked. The man's face was bleached to a dull, shining whiteness. "Yes, sir," he said. "It was Master's voice." Together, they hurried down the stairs. Darcy stumbled into the garden, followed by the servant with the candle. The monstrous leaping shadow of himself was cast before him on the lawn, and there was this strange, pungent smell that came from the garden. He saw that the hammock in which Frank so often laid, he could see the white shirt as if a man was sitting up on it. But across that there was a strange dark shadow, and as he approached, the pungent smell grew more intense. He was now only some few yards away when suddenly the black shadow seemed to jump into the air and then come down with tapping of hard hoofs on the brick path that ran down the sitting area and galloped off into the bushes. When that was gone, Darcy could see quite clearly that a shirted figure sat up in the hammock. For one moment, from sheer terror of the unseen, he hung on his step, and the servant joined him. They walked together to the hammock. It was Frank. He was in shirt and trousers only, and he sat up with braced arms. For 1/2 second he stared at them, his face a mask of horrible terror. His upper lip was drawn black so that the gum of his teeth appeared, and his eyes were focused not only on the two who approached him, but on something quite close to him. His nostrils were widely expanded as if he panted for breath, and terror was drawn on his smooth cheeks and forehead. Then, even as he looked, the body sank backwards and the rope of the hammock was strained. Darcy lifted him out and carried him indoor. Once he thought there was a faint movement of the leg that lay with so dead a weight in his arms, but when they got inside, there was no trace of life. But the look of supreme terror and agony, of fear, had gone from his face. A boy, tired of playing but still smiling in his sleep, was the expression on his face. His eyes were closed, and there was a beautiful smile of satisfaction after hearing the melody of panpipes. Then they looked no further, as it all became very clear. Frank had come back from his bath before dinner that night, in his usual costume of shirt and trousers only. He had not dressed, and during dinner, so Darcy remembered, he had rolled up his sleeves of the shirt to the above elbow. Later, as they sat and talked after dinner, he had unbuttoned the front of his shirt to let what little breath of wind on his skin. The sleeves were rolled up now. The front of his shirt was unbuttoned, and on his arms and on the brown skin of his chest were strange discolorations which grew momently clearer and more defined, till they saw that the marks were pointed prints, as if caused by the hoofs of some monstrous goat that had leaped and stamped upon him. That was the end of our story. Thank you so much for listening to it. I will be back again with another story. Till then, do subscribe to my channel and do press the like button. Thank you.